lobby. To admit all participants in the lobby, press star 2 1.
Yep. So we have on Teams.
Right now,
That's
Alana and, Sealay's likely the,
Oh, there's Mr. Lamont. Committee members, just a heads up on a couple of sort of housekeeping items before you kick off your meeting. One has to do with the speakers, or these speakers, is if you want the folks who are with us on Teams to be able to hear you, you need to make sure you use it. Also to make sure our guests can hear as well, this will project for them. But also, if you're not speaking, go ahead and turn it off, because if too many are on at the same time, we'll stop having effect. Apparently only 5 or 6 can be on at the same time, so just trying to remember. We'll remind you if we also can't hear you, but just a heads up on that point. And as I've already referred to, we do have a couple people on Teams in terms of committee members. We have Mr. Lamana and also Ms. Cozell. Of course, Ms. Cozell is your chair, so since she is virtual right now, Mr. McKay will be acting as your chair today. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to go ahead and call the meeting to order. Would you guys take it away?
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, and welcome everyone to your Development Review and Regulations Committee, or DRRC, meeting for August 2026. We have a fairly large agenda this evening. Recognize that Mr. Botorf has a commitment where he needs to depart by 5:20, so we will work expeditiously to get through these items this evening. Many of you are familiar with some of them, having previously discussed them, establishing them at a previous committee meeting. The first item for your consideration this evening is an ordinance amendment, which we are calling your Phase 1 companion amendments. These are amendments to Chapter 165, the zoning ordinance, and Chapter 144, the subdivision ordinance, to incorporate policy type recommendations from the Berkeley group that were identified during the Phase 1 update of the zoning and subdivision ordinance update that was adopted by the Board of Supervisors in May of 2026. Some of these recommendations were also identified in the zoning diagnostic and subdivision diagnostic that were completed as part of that update process. Again, these were policy type changes that staff felt were outside of the nature of the Phase 1 update, which was really a reorganization and state code compliance change. And the proposed amendments seek to improve the efficiency of the ordinance, remove kind of redundancy and kind of standards that aren't necessarily legislative in their function, and to maintain that kind of business nature or friendly approach that we've taken with the implementation of the zoning ordinance. So there are a number of changes across both Chapter 144 and 165, which staff will walk through. In regard to Chapter 144, we have changes to general access and sidewalks and streets. The main change is changing the waivers from Board of Supervisor waivers to subdivision administrator waivers. Whereas Board of Supervisors waivers require legislative action, which means going to a Board of Supervisors meeting, they would become administrative actions of the subdivision administrator, and they align with other actions that the subdivision administrator is permitted to handle as far as waivers go. And these are best practices for the waiver process. So it pertains to the allowance for private streets and property age-restricted communities, waivers to interparcel connectors, intersections, cul-de-sacs, and then we removed waivers for streetlights and removed waivers for sidewalks and private streets in subdivisions. Again, for easements and environmental features, changing a board waiver, removing the board waiver for underground utilities and environmental features and protections, removing the waiver for stormwater management plan. That's actually a piece of state code that changed as it relates to the requirements for stormwater management plans on developments of less than 15,000 square feet. So that was an outdated standard that needed to be removed. For Chapter 165, again, a similar slate of amendments. The first is regarding final master development plan submission approval. We have a outdated requirement where the county administrator was required to sign master development plans. This is a vestige of a period of time when master development plans were actually reviewed and acted on by the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors. And that is the last vestige of that element of our past ordinance that's been hanging out there. And we will be removing that, and master development plans would only need to be signed by the planning administrator or the planning director rather, when they meet all the criteria of the zoning ordinance. Industrial design standards is part 407. We would remove the board of supervisors waiver for the screening of machinery and make the waiver standard that was established the criteria for allowing a change in the screening requirement for mechanical equipment. For the R5 zoning district, we would change a planning director waiver to a zoning administrator waiver. The zoning administrator is the ultimate arbitrator of the zoning ordinance, so we'd be clarifying the role of the zoning administrator and removing a standard where the planning director had the ability to make that waiver. A couple of use standard changes to the sanitary landfill, welding repair, tractor truck, and tractor trailer truck parking. Again, changing board of supervisors waivers to either a consistent standard that enables an alternative standard where it's appropriate, or establishing that the zoning administrator would have the ability to provide a waiver in cases under certain circumstances. So this slate of companion amendments is presented to the committee this evening for information discussion. Staff will be taking any comments from the committee that you will have forward to the planning commission at their public hearing at a date to be determined. And we appreciate the opportunity to discuss this amendment and entertain any questions you have. And I'll hand it back to you, Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you. Any discussion? We don't need any vote on this, right? Just for information.
Correct. No vote. We typically just take your comments to the planning commission or any suggested edits. Okay, with no comments, I appreciate that. We will move on to your next amendment. This is your 2026 legislative update. Because we're only the planning commissioners here this evening. You all will recall when we updated did the phase 1 update to the zoning subdivision ordinance, one of the recommendations from the Berkeley Group and a best practice was to annually review amendments to the Code of Virginia for their applicability to our ordinance and to make any changes necessary to enact state code. One of the things that was identified in our zoning diagnostic was while we implemented a number of state code changes in practice, they weren't actually codified correctly in our ordinance. So there was a element of conflict between what the state code enables or requires of localities and what is in our ordinance. So this is our first go at keeping our ordinance fresh and up to date. And these are your 2026 amendments. The first was House Bill 1212. And this states that any locality with a population of 20,000 or more shall adopt and maintain a zoning district classification that permits one family and two family dwellings and townhomes as at by right use on lots with a minimum lot area not exceeding 3,000 square feet. We are recommending an ordinance amendment to implement this standard, specifically an amendment to your RP district standards, and we are recommending the reduction of the single family small lot housing type from a minimum lot size of 3,700 square feet to 3,000 square feet to implement this change. This is part of a series of bills, some of which you'll see this evening, to address housing in the Commonwealth and to make the development of housing easier to provide affordability and workforce housing in situations where it's not currently being provided at a level necessary for the Commonwealth. The next item for your consideration is House Bill 1279 and its companion bill, Senate Bill 288. This is a package known as the Faith and Housing Act, and this is a amendment to the Code of Virginia that takes effect on January 1st of 2027 and sunsets on January 1st, 2031, so it is a 4-year period that enables religious institutions and other tax-exempt organizations to develop housing on their properties, regardless of where they are located. There are some additional stipulations. For example, they have to be on public utilities, so that would eliminate, religious institution in the rural areas for doing affordable housing or building houses on it. But this is a change. After consulting with the county attorney, staff is recommending that no action be taken, that we hold. The real driver for that is the sunset clause. If we added it to the ordinance and then it sunsets and isn't renewed in 2031, we have to go back and remove it. The county attorney is confident that we can implement that state code change without having to include it in the ordinance. This is House Bill 1463, and this is about allowing manufactured housing on any open lot in a valid non-conforming mobile home or manufactured home park district, regardless of whether a valid non-conforming manufactured home is currently located on the lot. As many of you are aware, there are a number of mobile home parks throughout the county, and the lots don't conform to our current zoning ordinance standard, and this would require that the locality not prohibit someone locating a mobile home on those. In practice, we're currently doing that. Actually the section of the ordinance that pertains to manufactured housing includes the necessary state code references, so our ordinance is in compliance with the state code change that was made. So this one is provided to you all as for your attention to show you that we are compliant with the change that is being recommended or implemented by the state. This is House Bill 655. I think in our application materials, we inadvertently listed this as part of this bill, but it's actually a separate bill that amends existing provisions that requires localities to permit manufactured homes in all areas zoned for agricultural, and it expands that requirement to require that all zoning districts for site-built housing is allowed, that you can locate a manufactured home on those lots, and it allows for you to set your step backs and maintain your lot sizes, but says that manufactured homes are allowed anywhere stick-built housing or other modular type housing would be allowed. This will require an ordinance amendment to our definition for single-family dwellings. The current definition contained in part 1105 states that single-family dwellings exclude manufactured housing, and we would need to strike that requirement to comply with the state code change. That's another one of those housing bills that was part of a larger effort in this General Assembly session to address housing need in the Commonwealth. The next bill for your consideration is Senate Bill 531. That requires that a locality included in zoning ordinance for single-family residential zoning districts, accessory dwelling units or ADUs as defined in the bill. And this provision takes effect on July 1, 2027. Happy to report that no action is required because our ordinance is compliant with that. We allow under our accessory dwellings rule, accessory dwellings in all of our residential and agricultural zoning districts, whether that be an attached or detached unit. So our ordinance is compliant with the state code change. So these items are presented for information, discussion, and we would be seeking comments from the DRRC to the Planning Commission on the Code of Virginia amendments requiring ordinance changes. Staff would note, if you're unfamiliar with the General Assembly, they passed
Participants are waiting in the lobby.
hundreds of
To admit
bills,
all
not thousands of
participants in the
bills.
lobby, press *2 1.
every cycle, and not all the bills apply to individual localities. Some are specific to certain localities or certain areas of the Commonwealth, but after reviewing all the bills that are applicable to us, these are your series of amendments that we wanted to call to your attention this evening. So I will pass it back to you, Mr. Vice Chair, for any comments from the committee. Welcome, Mr. Wagner.
A little late, sorry. Aren't all of these, we have to comply with them. We have no choice, is that correct?
That is correct. We do have to comply with them, but it does require an ordinance amendment. They don't take effect automatically. They require us to adopt them. But yes, that would be correct, yes, sir. Whether we list them in the ordinance or not, we have to comply.
Okay.
Having them in the ordinance prevents legal challenges and other issues.
How much work is on your own part to bring us up to see?
Fortunately, your phase one ordinance and the phase one zoning and subdivision ordinance rewrite really helped us get into compliance with all those mandatory and optional provisions of the state code that require inclusion in our zoning ordinance. And again, this is a regular maintenance piece. So this year we have 2 bills that we need to make changes to the ordinance to make sure that we stay in compliance. In future years, there may be no bills or there may be 10 bills. So we'll just keep up with this on an annual basis. And we're fortunate on staff. Eric is actually very interested in the General Assembly and kind of keeps up with it. And then the rest of us as planners through the American Planning Association Virginia chapter participate in the legislative committee. So we're keeping apprised of these as the year goes on and making notes. And as we get to the adoption, which is typically July 1, we'll be bringing these packages to the Planning Commission board each year from here on out.
I have a concern about the church being able to build on properties, but they're restricted if they can't hook up to water and sewer. I see a problem with that.
I think the way the bill is currently written, it requires that public utility connection. Certainly, we can convey those comments through the legislative liaison for the county as a concern that we are, primarily a rural locality. We have a number of churches in areas where they don't have access to public utilities, and that if the bill were to be renewed or amended in the ensuing timeframe, that maybe they make those changes. That's certainly an option
Yes,
we
it's
could do.
got undue restrictions on the church.
Thank you for those comments, sir.
Any further discussion? All right, thanks. On to the next item.
We'll let Mr. Bishop handle this one. Yes, sir.
As you recall, we did receive, at the last Board of Supervisors meeting, directive via resolution to remove data centers from the ordinance. So that is what has been proposed. There was a draft attached at that time. This proposal will amend Chapter 165 zoning to remove data centers as permitted or conditional use in certain zoning districts, and remove any other references to data centers. And as I've already noted, this was authorized by the Board of Supervisors on August 12th, 2026. In consultation with the county attorney as well as outside counsel, that is how the draft that is before you was developed, which does a full removal. We understand that there are other opinions in the community and even on our decision-making bodies. Please feel free to share those concerns, and we will carry them forward to the Planning Commission and Board en route to the Board's ultimate direction to us.
Any discussion on the item?
Let everyone else go, then I'll go.
I think, if I understand correctly, this is our best route for, not allowing these things to move forward, not move forward, but be fought for in the future. Judge, going by what legal counsel has directed us,
I would like to see more specific language on, totally just not having data centers, no matter what you call them.
To clarify, Mr. Whitaker, you're seeking specific prohibitory language?
Yes.
Thank you.
Well, I'm probably in the minority, but I think we're being crazy. You can certainly set the criteria up to where a data center is not gonna hurt anybody, anywhere, in any place. They can provide their own electric, they can provide their own water, they can provide everything that they need. Give them at least a path to allow them to come. But to prohibit them, I think, is a legal problem. I don't know, but I think it's a legal problem. We're gonna become the bedroom community of the rich counties that take in the data centers. So I'm vehemently opposed to this. That's just my feeling.
And I apologize, the county attorney was not able to be here to deal with specific legal questions as far as what's challengeable or more challengeable, although we have had fairly extensive conversations with him. And it speaks more to the concern of a prohibitive ordinance actually being more challengeable than a removal from the ordinance due to the permissive nature, not
I would
only of the
agree with
Dillon
that.
role, but the zoning ordinance.
I would agree.
So that's why the recommendation is where it is. But obviously your feedback's still a little different than that. We'll take that forward as well. Thank you. Is there anything else on this topic?
further discussion? No vote for this either.
That's correct, sir. That brings us to another ordinance amendment, and that is the removal of the TM zoning district. This came out as part of the discussion, the same discussion regarding the removal of data centers from the ordinance. The board then went on to say, we'd like you to remove the TM zoning as a district as well. So we have drafted that as well. It's more extensive than you may think, so that goes on for quite a while, but it removes all references to the TM within your ordinance. So we're working forward on that, seeking any input you may have for the planning commission and subsequently the board on that item. To be clear, that is also related to the working to make it so you cannot do a data center.
And if I understand during our discussions yesterday, the other things that were allowable in the TM zone were allowed in other areas as well.
Yes, sir.
It's just not the data center.
Yes, sir.
Any other discussion? Thank you.
Thank you. I'm gonna turn it back over to Eric to talk about battery storage.
Thank you, Board. Eric Bittner, Planner 2. This is a proposal to allow battery energy storage systems, or BESS, as a conditional use in the M1, M2, TM, EM, and R8 zoning districts. This was initiated by the Board of Supervisors at the request of the developer. This was actually with you all back in your May meeting. You had deferred action until you can see a bit more of what the site is. Since that time, staff have visited a battery energy storage system down in Danville. I will be including that in this presentation. One thing I will note is that you will notice that the technology manufacturing district is still in the ordinance change. That is because that is still in the ordinance. That is, as we've just seen, being proposed to be removed from the zoning ordinance, and in the event of the approval, that section will be removed from this proposal as well. Also, just an update since May, the state of Virginia, the Department of Energy was charged in the General Assembly session this year to draft a model ordinance for local regulation of battery energy storage systems. That is due to be completed in December. Additionally, staff are anticipating that there will be significant state code changes in 2027. What kinds of changes, we don't know, but there is already discussion, from what we understand, for those to make an appearance. So I expect this will probably not be the last you see of this. As part of our review, we did a locality comparison. We looked at 12 different localities and also a draft model ordinance that was prepared by the state of New York, which was used by Albemarle County. Additionally, we toured a facility down in Danville that was hosted by a Light Shift corporation. They do not have any sites in the Shenandoah Valley and don't seem to be particularly interested in expanding up this far. We did notice in that review that most localities either do not regulate separately or have substantial use requirements, but they do typically require compliance with additional codes. Those are on your screen now. Underwriters Laboratories 9540A and some substitutes based on specific chemicals that they're using. Additionally, standard test method for evaluating thermal runaway fire propagation in battery energy storage systems. Staff will also note that is largely identical to UL 9540A. We're looking into exactly why that has been called out separately with other localities, but they have listed them as separate ordinances to be complied with. So we're requiring that as currently. And then also National Fire Protection Association 855 and standard for the installation of stationary energy systems. Additionally, pretty much every locality requires a siting agreement and decommissioning plan. And then they also require an emergency access route and emergency operations plan that's approved by the fire marshal. And they also typically require a noise study as well. For the proposed standard, we've incorporated identified best and common practices from the localities. That includes those additional standards that they have to comply with. We're similar, we duplicated requirements from other specific uses in regards to setbacks and screening. This will also only apply to areas where battery energy storage systems are primary uses. In the event that they're used as an accessory use, such as to solar facilities, those are exempt. One thing also that we did not identify a best practice for is distance from transmission lines. No locality seem to have a good idea of what is the best system, so input from this committee in regards to that would be of value. And then, I mentioned earlier that we had toured a facility. These are site pictures of those facilities. This is an 8 megawatt battery energy storage facility, down in Danville. The units themselves are converted sea containers. They're implemented to the grounds, and then they're surrounded by non-flammable material to stop spread of fire. And then this is an up close on the interior of what is inside those units. On the left is one of the fire suppression systems that they utilize. And then on the right, on the panels that are along the side, those are the actual batteries that go into those areas. Requested board action. The Board of Supervisors discussed this item and sent it forward on March 25th. You all discussed this on May 28th. Staff are seeking additional comments from the DRRC towards the Planning Commission and Board of Supervisors for consideration. Also, we're seeking a recommendation from the DRRC on whether or not you would like us to wait for completion of the state model ordinance in December. At this point, staff are available for any questions.
So do we have any forthcoming applications that we can't wait on this before the state's recommendations?
So, there is, we don't have any formal applications, but there is a developer that is looking to locate a battery energy storage system in the county, but they've not submitted any formal applications yet.
I believe we should wait until the state puts out information.
So we don't have any idea when this application could be coming in, and waiting might put us in a position that we aren't prepared for.
I believe they're waiting on an ordinance to apply under. They were the ones who requested the ordinance.
So if we wait, they'll wait, is what I understand.
At least,
Okay.
So if we implement this ordinance, is this about right use?
No, sir, this is being proposed as a conditional use permit. So in the event of this ordinance being approved, any applications would come before the Planning Commission and Board of Supervisors for approval and for additional conditions.
Can you explain the decommissioning? I know you referenced the Code of Virginia there. What exactly does that mean? What do they do with these things when they're done?
Yeah, I can speak to that. So decommissioning plans, they are permitted by the state of Virginia only for 2 uses: battery energy storage systems and solar generation facilities. We have not yet found in the state of Virginia a battery energy storage system that has been decommissioned. But essentially that covers the removal of the facility and restoration of the site back to its original state. That goes forward for bonding and approval as part of the conditional use permitting process.
So for the context of the solar projects, the projects have an approved decommissioning plan, and then they carry a bond that covers the removal of all the equipment on the site and the restoration of the site to the pre-development condition. That bond is held in perpetuity as long as and it's evaluated on a rolling cycle to make sure that the cost of the bond covers the cost of the material and the equipment and the restoration. So it's under our performance bonding requirements, it's a fairly active process where we keep up with that on an annual basis to make sure that the bond covers the true cost of the decommissioning. So it's an added layer of protection for the localities in the event that one of these companies goes belly up or defaults or and the property becomes bank owned and the county wants it out of the county, then they can decommission it under the bond.
Go back to the picture. I'm sorry. Sorry. So those essentially look like mobile minis, and they're very portable.
Yes, sir. They're placed on site and then anchored into the grounds on typically on a concrete foundation.
Look like that one must have a CO system for fire suppression.
Correct. Yes, sir. Also, one thing to note too is with their cooling systems, we did go into that. Most of them are now going into similar cooling systems using the glycol that you'll also see in data centers. One thing that was interesting was with this site, they did not have any water usage with their system. We're assuming that has something to do with formulas, but we didn't get a specific answer on that because none of us are chemists.
Can you go back one more, back or forward? I need to stop right there. Yeah, basically these are modular components that stick in there. Each one of those is a modular component. And
Yes,
they
sir.
cycle out all the time.
Correct. Yes, sir.
About every 3 to 4 years, they're cycling through them.
Yeah, so the exact timeline of when they cycle them out is based off of what kind of materials they're using in the battery creation.
Correct. So when you decommission, you're only decommissioning a certain number of them.
No, so the decommissioning applies to the facility itself.
Correct.
So to go back, the decommissioning covers the removal of the containers, the containment cells. These individual batteries here, these are replaced throughout the facility's lifespan. That's not covered by the decommissioning. That's just done as part of the standard maintenance for the site.
I'd like to make a comment on these type of container systems. If something was to catch a blaze, there's nothing that contains a runoff in something like this. Definitely wouldn't want to go this route.
Yeah, I would have to agree with that. I mean, I'd like to know how effective the fire protection systems are on there, and, maybe comment from local fire authorities that, dealing with this kind of stuff. I think, if there is ever an event, proper containment has to be considered with the layout plan.
Yeah, so with that, there is a fire consultant on the Zoom call, Teams call that can answer some of those questions. Also, as part of that, we do require that they comply with the fire codes and underwriters laboratory, which covers that fire prevention. With that, would the gentleman for the fire code like to speak on that?
Yes, thank you. My name is John Walter, and I'm a consultant with Fire and Risk Alliance. And we focus on the utility sector, and we do a lot of work with battery energy storage. And my previous history, before I was with Fire and Risk Alliance, I was a firefighter for over 3 decades. I retired as an assistant chief from Fairfax County, where I led the fire marshal's office, and I was the fire official there as well, and worked on a lot of these regulatory issues. And if I could, and if you think it's appropriate, I can just give a 30-second overview of battery energy storage and the safety mitigation factors that have come into play over the last few years. Is that satisfactory for now? And then I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, I think that'd be great.
Okay, so a lot of what has happened recently with battery energy storage, it's changed really dramatically from what we had seen in the last 5 years, say, and the last 3 or so years, the codes and standards have really caught up to where the technology is, and that isn't always the case. A lot of times, fire departments are really on their heels with the technology, and now with the regulatory process that is in place, the codes and standards, the requirements that the battery energy storage systems have to comply with, has gone a long way to making sure that the containers, while there is a risk there, the fires don't spread beyond the container, and that is borne out by the testing that the manufacturers have to go through to be able to get their products listed. And that testing is end-to-end testing, and I'll say the difference between UL 9540, that's the listing standard. UL 9540A is the test standard, and they're coupled together, and to get that listing, you need to have the energy storage system pass, and all the batteries within that system pass the UL 9540A test standard. And what that does is it characterizes the batteries and how they potentially fail within the system. So they start at the lowest level, they test the cell, then they test the module, which has multiple cells put together, and then a unit, which is multiple modules put together, and then the large-scale fire test, which is basically what you see in that container in the picture up above. And they do that without any fire suppression at all. So that gives the perspective of what the gases are that come off of the batteries, how they fail, and if there's failures beyond the module level, which is very important because that's the piece that really controls and determines how the entire container ultimately will or will not fail. And within all of those standards, the big piece too that we have to keep in mind is that there's overlying technology that begins to isolate batteries from the grid and from each of the other containers when something starts to go wrong. So if that battery management system sees a change in the state of health of the battery, or something is starting to go wrong environmentally within that container, it's getting too warm, it's too cold, too much humidity, it will isolate those batteries from the rest of the containers. And that's really important to be able to say that there won't be a cascading failure across the containers. So within the codes and standards, the testing, the physical safeguards, the separation of the containers, and then that monitoring, those all play into how these containers fail and the mitigation strategies that are put in place, and ultimately how the fire department and how your firefighters will respond to an event at the facility. And I'll try and catch a couple of the questions that I heard, and specifically around the fire suppression system. And most modern battery energy systems, the containers do not contain any fire suppression system, because the goal is to get the flammable gases out of the container. If they're burning, that is actually a good thing, because there's no buildup of those gases that could explode, and that's the worst case scenario. So some of the older systems did incorporate those either clean agent systems or your carbon dioxide systems, and what they found out was those systems would extinguish the flames, but they don't stop the thermal runaway. And what is still occurring when that happens is the gases are being driven off. They're contained within the enclosure, and then they ignite, which causes an overpressure, or what you think of as an explosion, a deflagration. And that really is the worst case scenario. So through the testing and the additional safeguards that they use to exhaust the contaminants and have overpressure vents, we really don't see many of these special agent type systems contained within the enclosures. And from a runoff standpoint, one of the things that we really teach firefighters is not to try to extinguish these fires. The best case scenario is let the container burn out, don't put any water on it. If you need to protect the exposures, that is absolutely fine, but that would not cause any runoff concern, any different than rainfall on these containers. So that's a big point, and throughout the last year or so, there's been a lot of testing, and there have been some failure events where they have tested the groundwater, they've tested the soil around the facility, and through those events, they're just not seeing any exposure events outside of the facility. They're not seeing the groundwater contamination, they're not seeing a runoff contamination that would be beyond any acute exposure issues. So I'll go ahead and pause there, and if there's any other questions, or if there's anything that I brought up, I'm happy to answer questions around those as well.
So this, I don't know if it's a question for you or for staff, but as far as like, is there any routine annual inspection or anything like that required for these type of facilities?
Not from the zoning perspective, short of CUP condition compliance. Regarding regular inspections, not that I'm aware of, that could be worked in as part of the emergency response, the emergency operations plan. A pretty common requirement in that is that the facility hosts regular trainings with the local fire departments in that response. One thing actually too, this was brought up by a citizen earlier today, we had not found any instances in Virginia where these facilities were put indoors. But there are a couple of facilities out Midwest that were. We've not found any of those in the research, but if the fire engine could respond to how that affects the fire response, that would be appreciated.
Yes, Chief Marshall.
Sure, and these
anyone reviewed this? from our fire department?
Yes, sir, this was sent to the fire marshal, they did recommend some changes which were incorporated, and then, this was also sent to our building inspections department as well, who review for building code.
Okay, and their changes have been incorporated in what we have today?
The fire marshal, yes, sir, the building inspections department didn't have any recommended changes.
Okay.
Similar.
How do we get rid of damage by rodents? I know when I used to shoot out of Miller Milling and shot rats for how long? Groundhogs.
Groundhog.
Then a groundhog can tear up these things.
They'll just eat these.
How do we deal with that sort of thing? Because they're here.
Yeah, that's a good question. We don't have anything in the zoning ordinance that would regulate damage by animals. I would assume that would, be taken over by the, operator of the facility.
Ken, is enclosing these a realistic possibility then? I know you haven't done a lot of research on that, but do we?
For the indoors, sorry, we can look into that. We've not seen any in Virginia that have been put outdoors. All of those have, that, we've been shown those have been further out in, I believe, Texas and California. It does appear that it is clearly possible, as others have done it, but we've not seen any in Virginia that have done that.
They want a pathway for the guests to escape. So if it's
Yes,
an
sir.
enclosed facility, they would have to be designed to allow for that possibility.
Or have a tank that can camp, or have a.
Yes,
a tank
that's
can
correct.
capture-
And the
What kind of gas are we
requirements
talking about?
for the requirements for indoor battery energy storage are much stricter. And most of these containers, like the ones you see in the picture above, they're listed for outdoor use only. They're not meant for indoor use. So that's something that these containers would only be outside. Our protection strategies are completely different than